For this demonstration, we're going to talk about some of the drawing tools in Adobe Animate. I'm going to show you how to use different shapes, stroke versus fill, morphing the shape, deleting one section of the stroke, working with layers like hiding layers and locking layers, and some things you can do with the text tool. So let's start with using shapes. The shape tool is about halfway down on your toolbar here. By default, the rectangle tool is selected. Again, you can see this little arrow, which means there are nested tools. So if you click your mouse button and hold on it, you can see the other tools that are nested with it. There's the rectangle primitive tool, the oval primitive tool, and the poly star tool. So with the rectangle tool, in the properties panel, you have different options. You have your fill color, you have your stroke color. This is the opacity of them. In Animate, it's called the alpha, just like video in Premiere, it was called the alpha. But it's the transparency. And you can change your stroke size if you have a stroke. You can change the style of the stroke. This is the shape of the width of the stroke. And you can change the end caps. So you can have a rounded end cap. And you can, well, I'll talk about that later. Okay, so I'm going to click and drag to make a shape. This is my rectangle. It has a white fill and a black stroke. I can select the fill and move it with the selection tool. I can also change the color of the fill. I can use the selection tool to select one side of the stroke and delete it if you just want a top and a bottom. You can double click one of the outside lines and select the entire stroke, and you can change it. And you can change the size even after by going with the stroke size. So some of the styles, I'm going to choose a dashed line. You really can't see that unless you shrink down the size of there. I'm just going to keep a solid line. You can change the width there. If you make it bigger, you can kind of see what's happening with the different. So as you're making things, you can kind of play around with these if there's something that you find interesting. You can also go back and say, oops, I didn't mean to add a stroke, double click it and hit delete. And then you just have a fill. Also, with your rectangle tool, you can click on the stroke and say, I don't want a stroke, I just want a fill. You can also select the rectangle and say, I don't want a fill, I just want a stroke. So there's that. You have the rectangle primitive tool. I'm going to put a stroke and a fill just to show you what it does. With a solid line with a normal width. Here's what you can do. This has a rounded corner. So with 0 selected, it just makes a regular old rectangle. I can change the angle here, and now it has rounded edges. The thing about the rectangle primitive tool, even if I have 0 rounded edge, I can go in with my selection tool and click and drag on the anchor point and change how round it is, which is pretty cool. You can also select the individual rectangle corner and say, I want those to be 0 and the rest are rounded, which helps a lot with logos and stuff like that. Another cool thing about the shape tool, or the using shapes in this program, is that you can, with the rectangle tool, I'm going to draw a new shape. If you have the selection tool and you put it over the edge of one of your shapes, do you see how there's a curved line there? I can click and drag and curve the line. I can even go back to see this one makes a right angle and drag this one. So you could make new shapes. The next tool is the oval tool. It has similar options here. If you hold shift, you can make a circle. This will take down the fill. See, it's kind of hard to see unless you click off of it to deselect it. So that's how you can change. I'm going to put it back up to 100 there. And there is the oval primitive tool. One of the settings that I have set here is the inner radius. I can just close that to 0. But if you want like a donut, you could do something like this and turn the stroke off. You can have a different start angle or an end angle. So you have options here. The only thing with these primitive tools is that you can't curve the edge like you can on the other shapes. So with the oval tool, now if I go in with my selection tool, I can kind of use it to curve and change this shape a little bit. So if you don't think you can draw, that's okay. You have a lot of tools here that can help. Something else that's pretty neat is what's the next tool? The Polystar tool. So with the Polystar tool, I'm going to change the color. You can, in the tool options here, let's just put a stroke just because. You can choose the polygon and say I want 5 sides, 0.5 is the way to choose this. And again, you can go back and morph this shape if you want. You can even curve it. You have a lot of options here. Also, if you want to make a triangle, then you would click the star and say number of sides, 3. The polygon tool will make a triangle with the number of sides 3. And again, you can kind of morph things. Working with layers, let me show you again just in case. The stroke, remember you can go back and just delete parts of it if you want to. You can even remove it. Or if you decide you want this to be separate, you can double click the outside stroke to select all of it. And now you have 2 separate shapes. Those are some neat things that you can do. And the text tool, we're pretty much always going to use static text here. Horizontal, you can change the direction of things here if you need to. I'm going to type Pocono Raceway. Okay, so I have this text and I can go to my different options. In the character, you can change the font that you're using here. You can change the kerning. This is the alpha again. You can take the alpha down. If you decide you want to put down here in filters, you could add a glow and say, I just want it to stand out a little bit more. I usually change the quality to high and then increase the blur. We should choose a different color. Complementary colors. Something like that. And if you don't decide you don't like it, you can just click the little trash can. Here I am increasing and decreasing the spacing between the lines. That's the leading. You can center it. All things that are perfectly fine. So those are some different things that you can do with the text. And layers. You can make a new layer and draw on it, just like other programs that you've used. Now you can't see it. I should probably double click so I can make it bigger. Choose a different color. And if I drag this layer below layer 1, now you can see the text. I'm going to use the free transform tool, shrink that down. But anyway, those are just some options for you in Adobe Animate using the drawing tools.